Hi, everyone. Dr. Lily Brown here to talk about what to do about brain fog, part two. In case you missed it, we had part one, strategies for managing brain fog, and a separate podcast about what is brain fog, which you might want to check out before you listen to this one. So, when we're thinking about other strategies for managing brain fog, one thing that's really important is to practice dropping the judgment. And what I mean by that is, for many of us, the first time we start to notice problems with forgetfulness or problems with focus, our brain starts to get really judgmental. It starts to say things like, what's wrong with you that you just can't focus? You used to be able to do this. Maybe you're losing your touch. Maybe you're no longer competent to do this job or to do this task. And then the moment you start to judge what's happening, your anxiety increases, maybe your shame increases, your sadness increases, and all of that makes it so that it's hard to stay focused. And so dropping the judgment is a really important part of reducing the impact of brain fog. I like to think about this as pain leads to suffering when we're not willing to feel the pain. And I think this is relevant here because one way of dealing with brain fog is to say, like, oh gosh, my brain's just not working today. It's because of all the stress that I'm under. And it makes a lot of sense that I'm having a hard time today, given everything I'm up against today. That's one way to deal with brain fog that I would argue is a fairly healthy, non judgmental way to deal with it. Another way is to lead to suffering, which looks like there's something really, really wrong with my brain that I can't remember things anymore. And it must mean that my career's over. And no one's ever going to be able to trust me to do things because my brain is just so unreliable. That is an experience of turning the pain of brain fog into suffering by making it more than just a momentary lapse in executive functioning, which is usually what is happening when we're experiencing brain fog. It's not always the case, but in most cases, that's what's going on. It's temporary, it's stress induced or induced by anxiety or depression or problems with sleep. And if you interpret what's happening as a sign that there's something really wrong with you, it's going to make it even harder to get focused again. Because now, not only are you having a hard time with making a decision or concentrating, but now you're also fretting about, oh my gosh, what's going to happen to me down the road? And before you know it, you're off on a tangent and you're so far off task. In addition, it's really important to take some time away from the phone. We are trapped in a cage with our devices these days. Many of us find ourselves doom scrolling on our bed before we go to sleep at night. It's the first thing we look at in the morning. Many of us don't even have alarm clocks anymore. All of our, or not even watches. The way that we tell the time is through our phone. It's so important to spend time away from your devices, away from your screens, because these extra sources of stimulation drain our brain. And so whether that's taking a 10-minute walk outside or just spending some one-on-one time with a loved one away from your phone, if you're noticing having a hard time with concentration, you need time away from your screens and away from your devices. It's also important to coach people on how to manage you. And what I mean by that is if you're in a position where there are people who work for you, people who support you, like an administrative staff person, be clear about what works well for you. For example, I have a team of folks who work with me who are wonderful, and I will often tell them, I'm worried I'm going to forget X, Y, or Z. Can you send me a reminder about that? Because it's really important to me that I get it back to you. And I've got so much on my plate today. I'm worried I'm going to miss that. So can you send me a reminder about that? Or other members of my team, I have email me daily messages about what they're doing that day so that I know, not to bug them or I know how I can be helpful to them. And so I'm not guessing what they're doing. This is the way that they are managing me by being very clear about, what's going to set us both up for success. It's also possible, though, to manage up to your superiors. And by that, I mean, if you have a boss and you're noticing that there are some things that are making it hard for you to be as effective as possible at your job, part of managing up looks like having a conversation with your boss about, I notice when XYZ happens, it makes it really hard for me to stay focused. And I'm wondering if there are things that we could do that would help set me up for success, because I'm really committed to this job. I really care a lot about this job and I want to succeed. So many of us right now are struggling with people resigning and trying to fill these gaps. And so everybody in the health system wants you to stay and wants you to succeed. And the best way to stay and to succeed is to have open, transparent conversations with your employees and your managers about what could be helpful in making sure that you're able to stick around in the long run for the job. And lastly, it's so important to work on your sleep. And paradoxically, as I've mentioned in other podcasts, a lot of people who are struggling with sleep problems spend way too much time in bed. And that's because what ends up happening to them is they don't get a good sleep, they don't get a good night of sleep. And so then they start to panic and say, oh gosh, I better go to bed a lot earlier tomorrow. I'm going to get in bed at 8 o'clock. And they get in bed at 8 o'clock, but they don't fall asleep till 11. That actually is a really ineffective way of managing problems with sleep. If you notice that you would like to go to bed at 10, but you're regularly falling asleep at midnight, what you actually need to do is push back the time that you're getting into bed. And what will happen is if you continue getting up at the same time, your body will get more and more tired and will allow for you to fall asleep at an earlier time, provided that you don't take naps during the day. This is a basic principle of cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. If you're struggling with sleep, the worst thing you can do is spend a lot of time in bed. It might also be important for you to get an evaluation for sleep apnea. A lot of people have sleep apnea that never gets diagnosed. So if you're snoring a lot, or if other people are saying like, oh my gosh, you weren't breathing in your sleep last night, it was scary to me, especially if you have high blood pressure, it's a good idea to talk to your primary care doctor about whether you might have sleep apnea and whether it might be a good thing for you to get evaluated for it to set you up for success. I hope that this was helpful. If you have questions, feel free to shoot me an email at lilybr, B as in boy, R as in Robert, at upenn.edu. And thanks for joining. Take care.